Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the news brief. You guys might recognize the location behind me because I'm recording it again from Warsaw while I'm en route back to Ukraine from Lithuania, where I was attending a disinformation fellowship for a couple of days. That was a great experience, but unfortunately, today we're not going to talk about it. Today, we're going to be talking about Russia's Victory Day parade and how that affected Russia's image worldwide because of some very interesting events that happened, and also America's 180 on what they think of Russia. And of course, we're going to discuss it together in the comments so you don't have to suffer alone and I don't have to suffer alone. So, of course, please leave your questions, suggestions, anything you have on your mind down below. I'll read it, and I really appreciate this back and forth connection we have. Let's go. So, a little birdie told me, because obviously I wasn't in Moscow at the Grand Victory Parade, that there were lots of Ukrainian drones in Russian airspace that day. And they were obviously striking only military targets, but for Russia, that was a huge blow because they had to stop their airport traffic for over 30 hours, and there were planes being lined by dozens in the queue to take off, which, I mean, hey, since it's not a war, it's a special military operation and Russians are doing so well, I don't see what the problem is. I'm sure they're handling it a-okay. But anyways, airports all over Russia have been closed. People have been waiting for over 30 hours for their flights, on this day where Russia shows how cool and big and invincible it is. And they were closed because of Ukrainian drones, which were attacking solely military infrastructure, and not like Russia says it when, they say it, but actually only attacking military infrastructure to show that Russia is not as invincible and Russia is not as big and strong as it tries to show itself on the world stage. Also, obviously, Ukraine being able to get through into Russia's airspace and into Moscow's airspace during this Victory Day parade really shows world leaders that were attending that they're not safe and Russia can't guarantee security and safety even in their own capital, which is a big blow because even Ukraine, during Russia's massive airstrikes, has quite a bit of security for world leaders and for everyone really, and intercepts most of the missiles and has all of these contingencies of what to do if a massive airstrike happens when there is a big international figure in attending. So, for Putin, this really was supposed to be a show of power, the military parade, but in reality ended up being not a show of power, but a show of how much overblown and overinflated he's trying to make himself to look and his country to look. And that's a fantastic thing to observe. Yeah, call me petty, but it is what it is. To begin with, I think we need to talk about what Russia's military parade is. The whole world mourns the victims of World War II on May 9th, while Russia celebrates their own, because they consider it to be only theirs, victory over Nazism on May 8th. And Russia doesn't think that America helps. Russia doesn't think that any of the European countries helped. Russia takes all the credit for ending World War II, which is actually kind of funny because Russia and Germany together started it, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they invaded Poland together. And it was supposed to be a joint venture, and Russia was supposed to benefit greatly from this venture. The only reason it didn't, and they didn't divide Poland between Russia and Germany, is because Germany kind of dropped them. Because, I mean, hey, you can't really be friends with a dictator, and you can't really expect him to respect you and to not go back on his word. So yeah, if it weren't for Hitler turning his back on Stalin and just dropping Russia from this venture, it would have been Russia and Germany trying to conquer the world, because that's what it was to begin with. So it's kind of funny that Russia takes the sole credit for ending Nazism and World War II in the world. Meanwhile, they're the ones that started it together with Germany, and they hold equal responsibility for doing so. And they also did a lot of damage in all of the Soviet countries that weren't Russia while they were at it. And also during World War II, they basically took the time to exterminate a lot of people, and Jews included, on the territory of the Soviet Union as well, whoopsie, no one's ever going to find out because we're just going to blame it on the Germans. So yeah, it is incredibly tacky and incredibly ridiculous that while the whole world mourns, Russia celebrates a war, a winning a war that they literally helped create. And now we have Donald Trump doing the same thing to the United States, really taking a page out of Russia's playbook and renaming May 8th as the Victory Day, and also I believe November 11th, which would be the Victory Day for World War One. And it is very interesting that his thinking and his reasoning is basically like, oh, we've contributed so much and we've done all of these things, and we basically are responsible for all of these wars being won in our favor and in everyone's favor in the Western world. So we should take credit for it and we should celebrate because we don't get enough praise. And therefore, we're going to make these 2 days officially the days of victory and of the, grandiosity of the United States. And it's kind of sad to observe because this shouldn't be a day of victory. That shouldn't be a day to celebrate. That shouldn't be like a day of pompousness where you give yourself credit for ending the war. It should be a day of mourning of everyone who died in this war. And I think the difference between Russia and the Western world this entire time, one of the differences was in the perception of what happened in World War II, right? And in World War One, where most of the world understands the needless sacrifices and sort of the lives that were lost and the deaths and the families that were torn apart and the beautiful architecture that was ruined with bombings, and all the people's lives that were cut short and that were ruined and that would never be the same, all the PTSD, all the trauma that civilians received and the soldiers received. It's not something to celebrate. It's something to mourn because it was a lot of loss and it was a lot of sacrifice for something that shouldn't have happened to begin with. And now the US is siding with Russia on that and deciding to go with their own ego instead of going with the historical significance of this event. And I mean, it's not surprising because we know the Trump administration and how they operate. However, I do want to say that one thing that did happen recently with the Trump administration and how they operate is that JD Vance, who is the man that I personally do not really expect much from or anything at all, because I think that he's so underqualified to be the vice president, and he also says a lot of absolutely not fact check information, but just disinformation, like really malinformation, malicious wrong information. He said that actually Russia wants too much to stop the war with Ukraine, and that if you talk both to Russia and to Ukraine, you can see the gap in what the demands and what the perspectives are, because Ukraine's thinking and Ukraine's demands and Ukraine's wishes are reasonable, while Russia's are completely unreasonable. And that's a thing that honestly put me in a stupor, because JD Vance is the first person to scream at Ukraine and blame Ukraine, and is the first person to talk about, how reasonable Russia is and how much we need to stop helping Ukraine and how much we need to give Russia what Russia wants because, needless lives are lost. And it's just kind of striking, although it's not that surprising because the minerals deal was recently signed between the US and Ukraine, and it seems like that chapter really turned a page in how the American administration is handling Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because it now seems like they've secured an investment, they're happy they're going to be making their money, and they're no longer feeling the need to pressure Ukraine. So they changed their tune and they're talking about how bad Russia is, and they're talking about how reasonable Ukraine is. And I think it's kind of like, of course, I mean, I'm happy as a Ukrainian that the support intensifies, and I'm happy that, you know, albeit mixed messages, maybe Americans will finally kind of settle on who they support and stop being so Russophilic and stop being so tolerant of Putin. But at the same time, it's just sad because it's all about the money, right? The second that they got the money that they wanted, they stopped pressuring Ukraine and they changed their tune so much. But the damage is done because their supporters, and there are lots of them, unfortunately, they listen to JD Vance and they listen to Trump and they listen to their administration say all of these horrendous things about Ukraine and justify Russia and make Russia sound more reasonable. And then when they suddenly change their tune, it doesn't kind of counteract all of the months and months and months of malicious propaganda and malicious arguments that were done in not good faith, because that does, that doesn't change people's opinions and people's minds, because the damage was done. And it's just so upsetting that, this administration can be toying with something as important as human lives just for the sake of their own pockets. And it's really sad, but I guess we'll take what we can get. Circling back to Russia a little bit here, there were two things that were very funny for me. Well, three actually. Narendra Modi, the leader of India, actually decided to cancel his visit after, all of these leaders that wanted to visit Moscow's victory parade asked Ukraine to guarantee their safety and security. And Ukraine was like, we can't guarantee your safety or security during a war in a foreign country, especially one that's launching a war on us. Like, how can we guarantee your safety and security if it's not our territory? So Narendra Modi said that he was sick and decided not to go. But then recently we found out that he likely canceled his visit to Russia for the victory parade because, well, he has a lot in his hands right now, seeing as India and Pakistan are now at war. Which, welcome to pre-World War III world. I hope you, welcome to the end of the pre-World War III world. I hope you enjoyed it. But Alexander Vuic, the president of Serbia, did go to the Moscow parade, even though he initially wanted to cancel and not go because he was in poor health. But I think Daddy Putin probably called him and was like, no, you're coming, because obviously he pulls the strings. So he did come. And then he had the audacity to ask the EU that his visit to Russia, which is a dictatorship and an aggressor state, not count against Serbia's EU membership bid. I mean, hey, Alexander, maybe you should have thought about that before you made friends with Putin and before you decided to err on the side of Russia and before you decided to be incredibly pro-Russian and before you decided to help them out and do their bidding in Europe and parrot their narratives and before you went to the victory parade in Russia. Yeah, maybe you should have thought about that before. But anyways, who am I to judge? Robert Fico, Slovakia's leader, also had a very fun little mashup. He was not he was supposed to go at first. Then he also had some problems for which he had to cancel his visit, and all of these problems started appearing with all of these leaders right after Ukraine said they couldn't guarantee their security. Anyways, he did also decide to go to the parade in Moscow. However, he did accuse Estonia of trying to sabotage his visit to Moscow, or rather disrupt his visit to Moscow, because Estonia wouldn't allow his private jet to enter their airspace in order for him to go to the parade, which, I mean, yeah, why would Estonia not allow his jet to go to a parade of the country that Estonia fully understands probably wants to invade them one day and, borders them and is an aggressor neighbor? But yeah, so this was quite funny. I find it hilarious that all of these leaders were scared to go. Then Putin obviously told them they have to go because image is what matters. And he wanted to show this show of strength and Russia's military parade and how great they are, their victory over Nazism, which, by the way, they don't count World War II's beginning and ending the same way as we all do. They count it from 1941 when the first bombs dropped on Kyiv, and then they count the end of it as 1945 when Russia won over Nazism. So, for the rest of the world, World War II is a little longer than for Russia because they only count it as a world war once they entered it, right? And that's legitimately being taught in Russian schools. So I'm happy to see that his little show of power victory parade didn't pan out as he wanted, because instead of showing the force and strength and Russia's invincibility, they had to deal with a bunch of Ukrainian drones in the sky hitting their military infrastructure, and also closed all of their airports and had like dozens of planes waiting on the tarmac for over 30 hours. Best present for Russia's little celebration day. And that's all I have for you for today, unfortunately. And if you enjoyed this brief and would like to see more briefs like that, but albeit maybe not as I'm in transit, please do subscribe to this channel and turn on all of your notifications. Also, like this video, send it to a friend, or share it on your social media, because that does help in the economy of YouTube a lot. And leave your thoughts, questions, suggestions, anything you have on your mind. I read all of it, and I'm very interested in hearing your opinion. See you next week.